How to install a street legal kit on your Club Car DS golf cart. The first step is to remove the roof, which is 2 front bolts here and the 2 bars in the back. Mine doesn't have the rear seat kit installed yet on it. The next step is to disconnect your main wires and accessory wires here and here. And this is the main power for the wiring harness. Now I'm replacing one that was already on here because it didn't have the turn signal handle and the horn didn't work. And then here is where I mounted the fuse box. And the old harness was clipped on, was zip tied on to these holes here, here, and here. And then zip tied to the original harness and run underneath the frame bar there. And then it runs in between these 2 frame rails here and comes up right here. So if you were doing a new one, you would just take off the body, start at the front. I have the new harness laid out here from end to end. Micro switch for the brake. This is where it hooks up to the battery, the main fuse, and then these are the tail light. The longer one is the passenger side. And the headlight switch is right here. So the next step for me is, since I'm replacing an older wiring harness kit, is to remove the harness. I've unclipped all the zip ties along the frame and disconnected the battery terminals. So these are the tail light plugs. So I'm just gonna, got everything loose, start here. Tail light plugs. And we're just gonna drop those down on the floor between the batteries and the frame. So now we've got it on the floor. Looks like all the zip ties are loose. So we'll just go to the front and pull it. We may have to come back here and feed it between the frame rail. It's all loose in the front. And somebody taped up the plug here, and I've removed the brake light switch wires here. So those will just go down through the floor. Now if you're putting in a new harness, you won't have to do this part. Alright, it's hung up somewhere on the bottom here. The little fuse is hung up on the frame rail right there. Alright, I've got that loose. Now these other conduits, the orange extension cord is for a voltmeter that goes from the batteries to the dash. A state of charge voltmeter, and this is for a cigarette lighter plug. And I have a 20 amp, 48 volt to 20 amp converter. Which I mounted right down here. Alright, so now it should all slide out. And the hardest part about this was getting the micro switch bracket which these two screws here which mounts on the between the body or the floor pan underneath and the brake arm. Which was removed on mine, which is why I'm not using the old wiring harness. I'm upgraded. They were halogen. I'm upgrading to LED, and it was a better deal just to buy the whole kit because I was missing the turn signal arm, which I've just mounted here. That's self-explanatory. It's just a clamp, like a radiator hose style clamp. Just loosen it up to break the clamp free, put it on there, tighten it back down, feed it back in and tighten it back down. And then the wire's hanging loose here, and this will go. There's two screws here and here for the dash panel. So we'll just pop that out to put this turn signal harness through, and that plugs into the main harness. Okay, so if you're not removing a new harness, this is where your starting point is once you remove your roof and front part of the body and seat and unhook the batteries. So what I'm going to do is start at the front, and I'm just going to put the longer side goes towards the passenger, so we're just going to put a zip tie here. Okay, so we started with the longer lead for the front headlight. That looks like enough, and I'm not going to tighten the zip tie, so I'm just going to put a zip tie there to keep that in place, and then we're going to start stuffing the rest of the wiring harness in place, which I have laid out here, and I'm going to work from the front to the back. Okay, so now we've got the old harness removed, and we're starting to place the new one in there. What I did is stretched out the harness from front to back. You can still see the back part here, laid it out, and then we're starting in the middle. And this is the most difficult part to do by yourself unless you have a helper to hold the screwdriver on the two machine screws that go through the floor to mount the brake pedal micro switch, which is right there. So I had to hold the carpet up with a screwdriver on one hand and a wrench on the other to tighten those up. And I had to bend this bracket right here outward slightly to get the right angle. And you just want to make sure that when the brake pedal is pressed, you hear a click, and then it clicks again. Click, click. So that's it. So that's working. Then we just fed the wires to the front up here, right above the front wheel. And then the next step is where I have these two wires for my cigarette lighter and state of charge voltage meter. We're going to run the rest of the harness, the back part, up through there, position the battery connection in the right spot, and then feed the longer side of the tail light to the passenger side and the shorter side to the driver's side. Alright, so we've got the tail light harnesses here. Just gonna pull those through, and we're right next. The gray tube or wire recovery is the factory harness, so we're just going right alongside that. Pull this up. I've just thrown the tail lights over the back seat for now. And now we've got the battery connection, and we're gonna hook that up. We're actually gonna hook that up to the 12 volt converter, which is down here. Right there. And then now we're just gonna take the tail light part, bring it back behind the batteries, stick it back there. And again, we're just following along where the factory harness is. You'll see I removed the back cover, and you may have to take off your back seat. I haven't put mine on yet. So we're just gonna and we fed these through right along with next to the factory harness. We just pull this through like this, and then I'm going to lay it there for now, and then the long one is going to go this way to the back tail light on the passenger side, and the short one's going to go that way. And we can just zip tie them to the frame rail here, and there's another frame rail in front of the back tail light. Alright, so now we've taken the back tail lights and routed them to the tail light holes. 3 zip ties here, one for the passenger side, one there for the driver's side, and then one here where the new harness follows the harness to the motor control. And again, just loosely zip tie in case we have to make any adjustments. There's passenger side, the longer one. The driver's side one, just fish it out of here. It's right there. And this part goes from that pillar to the one under here. So now we've got the entire harness routed. Here's your power lead. If you have 6 volt batteries, you can just hook that between 2 individual batteries. Just use your meter to test for 12 volts. I've got the converter down there, and I'm probably going to put a fuse box so I can hook multiple things to my 20 amp 48 volt to 12 volt converter. So I'll mount the fuse box with sticky tape underneath the run tow switch, right underneath there. The hardest part again was just installing the brake switch. Only be unless you have a helper, because you have to reach underneath your rubber floor mat and screw it in from the top and hold the nuts with the wrench on the bottom. Got the harness routed above the frame bar there, above the front wheel, and we'll zip tie all that out of the way so the steering doesn't catch on it. And then we've got it going up in here and loosely zip tied to the frame rail for the left and right headlights. Now all we have to do is make the connections. And of course I already put the turn signal mechanism on. It's just like a hose clamp that goes around the steering column. Run the wire through the dash here, and we just pop. After removing 2 screws dash. Plate will just pop off and lift out. Like so. Just routed the flasher relay and the turn signal wiring harness through the hole there. You might have to make a little notch. I'm just going to try to squeeze mine in there. And then here we'll just make the connections. So here's the connection. That only fits together one way. Snap that together like so.